When Fenrir broke the second chain binding him, the god of wisdom, Odin, watched in horror. The son of Loki was becoming more powerful by the day. In our last episode, we looked at the story of the world serpent, Gormungandr, whose very existence threatened the fate of the 9 realms. We witnessed his birth from the union between Loki and the giant Angrboda, and his subsequent growth to such immense proportions that the gods feared he would devour Midgard during Ragnarok. To prevent this, Odin took Jormungandr to Asgard, where he was chained up. But even the strongest bonds could not hold him as the serpent grew. With each passing day, Jormungandr's strength knew no bounds. Today, though, we turn our attention to another of Loki's children, who posed an equally great threat to the Norse pantheon. I am your host, and today we will explore the legend of Fenrir, the giant wolf, whose mere presence shook the foundations of Asgard, and whose coming of age heralded nothing but destruction. Welcome, friends. Before we begin, I ask that you hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell if you haven't already. Also, please remember to support us through our membership options. Your support helps us create more amazing content. And so without further ado, let's dive right into today's tale. When Odin learned that his brother, Loki, had fathered a monstrous child with the giantess Angrboda, he became troubled. Odin was the All-Father, and his duty was to protect the realm of Asgard and the people of Midgard. He knew from ancient prophecies that Loki's children would bring about the end of the world, and so he decided to take matters into his own hands. He traveled to the cave where the children lived and offered Loki a deal. Loki would allow Odin to take 2 of his children away, and in exchange, Odin would grant the remaining child a noble upbringing. Loki readily accepted these terms, as he never really cared much for his offspring. Thus, Odin took the children away, and as a result, Fenrir grew up in the halls of Asgard, while his siblings were condemned to live in the darkness of the underworld and the depths of the ocean. From the moment he arrived in Asgard, Fenrir grew at an unnatural rate, becoming bigger and stronger by the day. The gods realized they had made a mistake. By taking Fenrir into their midst, they had unleashed a monster upon themselves. Though Odin had attempted to control Fenrir, hoping to mold him into a weapon against Loki, it quickly became apparent that the wolf's thirst for power and destruction knew no bounds. As the beast grew older, his eyes burned with rage and hunger, and his snarling and gnashing of teeth echoed throughout the halls of Asgard, striking fear into the hearts of all who heard him. Only Tyr, the god of war and courage, remained unfazed by Fenrir's imposing presence. Day after day, Tyr visited the great wolf and stared into his blazing eyes. Over time, a strange bond formed between the two. One day, Odin summoned the other gods and announced that Fenrir had grown so powerful that he could no longer remain in Asgard. The gods had to find a way to control him, lest he destroy them all. But when they approached the wolf, he simply stared back at them defiantly. Odin knew that there was only one solution left. He had to banish the wolf from Asgard, hoping that he would eventually return when he was no longer a threat. However, the other gods opposed this idea, fearing that Fenrir might wreak havoc on the mortal realm. Tyr stepped forward and suggested an alternative plan. He proposed that the gods build chains to keep Fenrir contained in Asgard. The plan seemed like the best option, and so the gods went to work crafting the first chain. They worked tirelessly for 3 days, and when they were finished, they had created something truly magnificent. They called it leading, and it was thick and heavy as a mountain. The gods approached Fenrir and told him that they had a challenge for him. If he could pull the chain, they would let him go free in the mortal realm. But if he failed, he would stay in Asgard forever. Fenrir was eager to prove his strength, and so he put all his might behind the task. However, much to everyone's surprise, the mighty wolf was unable to move the chains even an inch. In a fit of rage, Fenrir snapped the chains like they were made of paper, and the gods were left in shock. Determined to succeed, the gods worked for 3 more days, and this time they made the chain twice as strong. They called it Drami. Once again, they challenged Fenrir to pull the chain, and once again, he accepted. The gods watched intently as Fenrir strained every muscle to move the chain, and for a moment it seemed as if he might actually succeed. But just as suddenly, he lost all hope, and the chain snapped like the first one. At this point, the gods were terrified, and they knew that they had to come up with another plan. Otherwise, Fenrir would destroy them all. They gathered in secret, and Odin decided that they needed help from the dwarves, who were known for their skills in magic and craftsmanship. The gods approached the dwarves and explained their situation, and the dwarves agreed to help them. After 3 days of hard work, the dwarves presented the gods with a chain that was unlike any they had ever seen before. It was soft as silk and thin as a ribbon, yet it was imbued with the strength of a mountain. They named this new chain Gleipnir. The gods approached Fenrir and told him that they had a final challenge for him. If he could break the chain, he would be set free in the mortal realm, but if he failed, he would spend the rest of his life in Asgard. Fenrir was hesitant at first, because he could sense the immense power that was contained within the seemingly fragile chain. However, he was desperate to be free, and so he agreed to the challenge. Before he pulled the chain, Fenrir noticed that the dwarves had inscribed strange symbols on it, and he asked them to explain. The dwarves revealed that the chain was enchanted with the sounds of a cat's footsteps, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish, the saliva of a bird, and even the essence of darkness itself. Fenrir was intrigued and decided to go ahead with the challenge anyway. As he pulled on the chain, it glowed brightly, and the symbols blazed with power. But to Fenrir's surprise, the chain did not snap. In fact, it seemed as if it were growing tighter and tighter around his jaws. Fenrir struggled to free himself, but the more he struggled, the tighter the chain became. Finally, Fenrir calmed down and realized that he had been outsmarted. He had fallen for the trick, and the chain was now binding him tightly. The gods had won. Yet despite his defeat, Fenrir's anger was far from extinguished. He glared at the gods and vowed revenge. And in that moment, the gods realized that they had made a grave mistake. They had unleashed a force that they could not control, and Fenrir's wrath would not be so easily contained. In a desperate attempt to appease Fenrir, the gods offered him a deal. If he agreed to stay in Asgard and behave, they would grant him one wish. Fenrir considered this offer carefully, knowing that this was his last chance to avoid certain destruction. After much thought, Fenrir finally spoke and said, "I have watched you gods fight many battles, and I have seen how valuable your courage is. You are always willing to sacrifice everything to defend the innocent. So I want you to swear an oath that whenever I call for help, you will come to my aid." The gods agreed to his request and swore an oath to honor his call for help whenever he needed it. But little did they know that they were signing their own doom. Fenrir may have been subdued for the moment, but his true nature was far from extinguished. The seeds of destruction had been planted, and one day they would bear bitter fruit. And so the prophecy of Ragnarok, the end of the world, continued to loom over the horizon. Fenrir was destined to break free from his chains and swallowed the sun whole, plunging the world into darkness. And on that fateful day, Fenrir would face off against Odin, the All-Father himself. What do you think will happen on the day of Ragnarok? Will Fenrir be able to fulfill his destiny and plunge the world into chaos, or will someone come to the rescue? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like and don't forget to share and subscribe.